48 Hours, action-packed cop buddy movie that lights a spark and showcases the performing talents of Eddie Murphy and Nick Nolte. Released in 1982, it tells the story of a brutal criminal called Gans, played by James Remar, who has escaped from jail with the help of fellow criminal Billy Bear, played by Sonny Landham. With them both now on the run, where rough around the edges, no-nonsense cop Jack Cates, played by Nolte, teams up with wise-talking jail inmate Reggie Hammond, played by Murphy, who was a former colleague of Gans, where Hammond is given a 48-hour leave from jail, where the unlikely duo must put aside their conflict and try not to beat the crap out of each other, and work together in order to search through the city's mean streets and catch the dangerous criminals in this gritty comedy classic that packs a punch. So today we are going to explore the movie that got the ball rolling in Eddie Murphy's movie career, by looking into 10 things that you didn't know about 48 Hours. Let's check it out. Number 10. The original premise was more brutal. 48 Hours came from the mind of Predator and Die Hard producer Lawrence Gordon, who conceived the idea sometime in the early 70s, and his original vision of 48 Hours was drastically different to the final film. His concepts are a criminal kidnapping the daughter of the governor of Louisiana, where he strapped dynamite to her head and threatened to blow her up in 48 hours if his demands are not met, which is where the title 48 Hours comes from, unlike the final film where it's the amount of leave time the Reggie character gets from jail. The two main heroes of the movie were pretty damn brutal too, with it being described as a pairing of the meanest cop teaming up with the most vicious prisoner inmate to join forces to save the governor's daughter and stop the evil criminal. So yeah, it sounds like the original vision of 48 Hours was going to be one mean and brutal movie. Number 9. 48 Hours had a string of contributing writers. From 48 Hours' conception in the early 70s to the movie's shoot in the early 80s, 48 Hours had a string of writers adding their input into the script as the movie was being developed. After Lawrence Gordon created the idea, in 1975 he worked on the Charles Bronson movie Hard Times, along with director Walter Hill, who of course was directing, and future Tomorrow Never Dies director Roger Spottiswoode, who was that movie's editor. When Spottiswoode learned of the 48 Hours treatment, he was keen to direct, but Gordon wanted Spottiswoode to write the movie's script instead, with Walter Hill as 48 Hours' director. So Spottiswoode wrote a draft and the project was picked up by Columbia Pictures. Then scriptwriter Tracy Keenan Wynn came on board and also did some work on the script. As time passed by, Columbia Pictures then sold the script to Paramount Pictures, who had their own ideas and got 48 Hours' director Walter Hill to make his own rewrites of the script. Another scriptwriter, Larry Gross, came on board to also work on the script. And even when the movie started filming, Commando and Die Hard scriptwriter Stephen DeSouza came on board to add his own touches on the script. Hill wanted most of the dialogue in the movie to be improvised, as he saw 48 Hours as a traditional urban thriller. So given that the script had all these writers adding their own ideas, it's amazing that the story in 48 Hours feels so fluent and not like a jumbled mess. Number 8. Original cast. The production of 48 Hours started to get more momentum in 1978, where Clint Eastwood was to star in the movie. Originally, he was to play the jail inmate, who gets out of jail to track down the movie's main villain. But director and co-writer Walter Hill decided to make Eastwood the rough and tough cop instead. It was then decided to cast Richard Pryor as the jail inmate. Yeah, imagine that, we could have had 48 Hours with Clint Eastwood and Richard Pryor. However, during the early production, Eastwood left the project to star in Escape from Alcatraz instead, which put 48 Hours' production to a halt. 2 years to be exact. Where after those 2 years, original writer Lawrence Gordon and producer Joel Silver wanted to get 48 Hours back on track, and approached Hill to come back on board as director, along with the idea of casting Nick Nolte as the cop, as he would make the movie more commercial. So one half of the heroic duo was cast, but the production now had to find the second half. Number 7. Eddie Murphy's first feature film. During 48 Hours' early production, Richard Pryor had become a megastar and was now off doing other projects. So next in line for the part was Gregory Hines, but he turned the role down. It was director Walter Hill's girlfriend who recommended Eddie Murphy, who incidentally was her client. At the time, the 19-year-old Eddie Murphy had become a huge sensation thanks to his comedy performances on Saturday Night Live. So Murphy took the part, making 48 Hours his first feature film. It was decided to add more of a comedy element to the story to make the most of Murphy's comical strengths. Murphy even contributed with some of his own input, like changing the character's name to Reggie Hammond, as he felt the character's original name, Willie Biggs, was too stereotypical. Apparently, Murphy's acting coach on 48 Hours was future Sopranos star David Proval. At the time, Murphy didn't know how to do tough, serious scenes for those moments in the movie where he was required to do so. So he took inspiration from Bruce Lee and said that in those scenes he was basically doing a Bruce Lee impersonation. Interesting. Well, I guess when all else fails, just pretend you're Bruce Lee to get the job done. Number 6. Then Murphy was nearly fired. As hard as it is to believe, but in the early days of filming, Eddie Murphy was nearly replaced for, get this, not being funny enough. In an interview with Inside the Actors Studio, Murphy said that there were talks behind the scenes for him to no longer be in the movie, as it was felt that he just wasn't bringing in the laughs. Which is strange, as I've always found him to be hilarious in 48 Hours. I mean, come on, just how much louder was he meant to be screaming out Roxanne?
Are you angry with me?
So minor tweaks had to be made to the script to tailor the characters more to Nolte and Murphy's personalities, and to inject more comedy all round. Murphy's character was even supposedly being rewritten right till the last day of shooting. Yikes! Not bad considering Murphy would go on to win a Golden Globe nomination for his performance as Reggie, as well as going on to becoming a pioneer of comedy in the 80s, starring in many successful comedy movies. Number 5. The first cop buddy movie. 48 Hours often gets the label of the first cop buddy movie, meaning a type of comedy action movie which sees the unlikely pairing of two cops, or a cop and a criminal or civilian, who are polar opposites who have to put aside their differences to defeat the antagonist and reach a common goal. In fact, if you Google what was the first cop buddy movie, you're instantly informed that it was 48 Hours, which is oddly accompanied with a picture of Riggs and Murtaugh from Lethal Weapon. Okay. However, the first known cop buddy movie was a 1949 Japanese movie called Stray Dog, as well as the 1967 American movie In the Heat of the Night, and the 1974 movie Freebie and the Bean. So with these other movies predating 48 Hours, is 48 Hours the first cop buddy movie? Well, it depends on how you want to look at it. The other films, whose releases were few and far between, do predate 48 Hours, but 48 Hours popularised the cop buddy formula and started a wave of like-minded movies with the likes of Lethal Weapon, Tango and Cash, Rush Hour and Bad Boys. So 48 Hours didn't invent the cop buddy subgenre, but created the formula as we know it, thanks to its popularity. I guess you could say that before 48 Hours, the cop buddy subgenre wasn't a subgenre yet. Number 4. Movie posters. There were two main posters released to promote 48 Hours. This one, which has grey cutouts of Eddie Murphy and Nick Nolte, standing in front of some white lights which are meant to represent the city skyline landscape, where Murphy is flipping Nolte the bird. Nolte's face looks a little off too, like he's caught off guard, no doubt because Eddie Murphy is giving him the finger. I like the font used, as they went for a digital clock format to emphasise the time aspect of the movie. In my opinion, this secondary poster is much better, which has the same idea as the other poster, but instead the characters are illustrated and it just looks more badass and more visually pleasing. And Eddie Murphy is still flipping the bird. There is just more chaos and urgency to this poster in my view. Modern home media releases have given 48 Hours this cover, but I don't know, to me it just doesn't have that certain flair about it to represent the movie with. It looks generic. And it also looks like two separate photos of Nick Nolte and Eddie Murphy just spliced together for the cover, with Nolte in a shooting stance while Murphy looks distracted by something. It's kind of awkward. I mean, it's okay, but give me this illustrated poster of the movie any day. Number 3. The music of 48 Hours. 48 Hours was scored by movie composing legend James Horner, who would go on to get great acclaim for scoring movies like Aliens, Braveheart, Titanic, and Avatar. 48 Hours is one of his earliest scores, where he delivers a fun and exciting soundtrack for the movie. Prior to 48 Hours, he'd scored several not as mainstream movies, like Battle Beyond the Stars and Wolfen. However, he scored 48 Hours the exact same year that he also scored Krull and Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan. So the time he composed 48 Hours was when his artistic merit was really starting to take off. But that said, I can't help but feel like in some parts his score sounds quite similar to the score that he would go on to compose for Commando, especially the more intense action-packed moments. But hey, that's not a bad thing, as I love the scores for both 48 Hours and Commando. And back in the day, getting James Horner on board your movie always meant that you were going to get one epic kick-ass score. Damn, I miss James Horner. Number 2. Sequel and failed remake. In 1990, 48 Hours got a sequel with another 48 Hours. I mean, why not? At this stage, both Lethal Weapon and Beverly Hills Cop had sequels. When the sequel went into production, both Murphy and Nolte were bigger stars, so they got pay rises for returning. Even most of the original crew returned, including director Walter Hill. But to me, the sequel often felt kind of flat and stale. It was lacking that certain magic that the first one had. It just didn't have that unique feel that made the first one stand out so much and be so memorable. But that said, it is still an enjoyable popcorn movie, and I'm sure the movie has a loyal fan base. Another 48 Hours made more money in the box office than the first one, but was still considered a financial disappointment, as it still didn't make as much as anticipated or cover certain costs that went into the production. It also didn't get as favourable reviews as the first one. Murphy felt that the movie didn't do as well as it could have done due to poor marketing, and so we never got a third 48 Hours caper. However, in 2017 it was announced that there would be a remake of 48 Hours. Yeah, because that's likely to work. Sarcasm. However, 2 years later in 2019 it was then announced that the script for the planned remake had been reworked into its own thing, so it would not have any ties to the original 48 Hours. Phew. Thank you! Still, I'm curious to see what movie the planned remake will become, and to see if it would have been worthy to carry the 48 Hours name. Number 1. 48 Hours in the box office. 48 Hours was released December in 1982, 1983 here in Australia, and was just shy of making $79 million on a $12 million budget, making it successful. Upon its release, it was in the third place at the box office, trailing behind The Toy, which starred Richard Pryor, who was actually going to star in 48 Hours, and Airplane 2, the sequel. 48 Hours would go on to be the 7th highest grossing movie of 1982. The movie also got a ton of praise from critics, with Eddie Murphy's comedic timing being considered a highlight, along with the on-screen chemistry between Murphy and Nolte. Not a bad compliment for a movie which sees these guys beating 50 shades of shit out of each other. It's gone on to be considered one of the best action comedy movies of the 80s, as well as being a landmark in the cop buddy genre as mentioned. And it's easy to see why. There is a dark and dangerous grit about 48 Hours, along with a fresh comical perspective, and the two just mesh together perfectly, creating a classic movie which stands as a landmark in the careers of Nick Nolte and Eddie Murphy. 48 Hours will also forever be known as the movie that jump-started Eddie Murphy's movie career and catapulted him onto the big screen. This film is perfect for thrill seekers who want more explosive action mixed in with great laughs in their movie diets. Anyway, I'm Minty, and just remember, we could have lived in a world with Clint Eastwood and Richard Pryor starring in 48 Hours. Interesting. See ya!